Easy Explain on the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche. First essay, sections 1 through 10. So the first essay is titled Good and Evil, Good and Bad. And to help split this up, break this up, make it a little bit easier to access, I'm going to be chunking these into parts, largely by themes of the essay. As you kind of go through them, you'll see there's definitely beginning and middle and end to some, or kind of like a part 1, a part 2. So for this first essay, we're going to start with sections 1 through 10. So let's jump to section 2, actually. We'll start right with section 2. We're going to take a look at a passage from Nietzsche where he's setting up where he thinks the genealogy of morals actually began. So Nietzsche says, "It is plain to me, first of all, that in this theory, the source of the concept good has been sought and established in the wrong place. The judgment good did not originate with those to whom goodness was shown. Rather, it was the good themselves, that is to say, the noble, powerful, high-stationed, and high-minded, who felt and established themselves and their actions as good, that is, of the first rank, in contradistinction to all the low-minded, common, and plebeian." I just want to keep going here, get to this next selection from section 2, and kind of explain both of them together. So Nietzsche goes on, he says, "It follows from this origin that the word good was definitely not linked from the first and by necessity to unegoistic actions as the superstition of these genealogists of morality would have it. Rather, it was only when aristocratic value judgments declined that the whole antithesis, egoistic, unegoistic, obtruded itself more and more on the human conscience. It is, to speak in my own language, the herd instinct that through this antithesis at last gets its word and its words in." So breaking down section 2, what Nietzsche is getting at here is that if in his investigations, in his research, and his studying, he's looking for the root of the word good, where it first started, where it came from. And what he's finding is that if you go back far enough in the history of language, within religion, you find that the people in power were essentially labeling their way of life, everything they did, as good, and everything that wasn't them, right, the people who did not have power, the lowly, to use some of Nietzsche's words, were bad, right? That's where this first distinction came from. So let's go on to see how Nietzsche continues to paint this picture in section 4. So Nietzsche says, "The signpost to the right road was for me the question. What was the real etymological significance of the designations for good coined in the various languages?" He goes on, he says, "I found they all led back to the same conceptual transformation, that everywhere noble, aristocratic in the social sense, is the basic concept from which good, in the sense of with aristocratic soul, noble, with the soul of a high order, with a privileged soul, necessarily developed. A development which always runs parallel with that other in which common, plebeian, low are finally transformed in the concept bad." Right, so he's really unearthing this here. He's finding that the people in power said that we are good, and the people who are not in power, those are all bad. And he's saying that, why is this the case? Why are we putting value into this system? How did this start? Why are we still using this system today? He's calling this into question. Similarly, looking at sections 7 through 9, this is a very misinterpreted section most of the time. A lot of people think that here Nietzsche himself is being anti-Semitic, when in truth, he is actually being anti-Christian anti-Semitism, right? So he's actually voicing out against Christian anti-Semitism here. And again, this goes back to the point of translation on Nietzsche and how he can be difficult to interpret based on how he's using language. But again, to pull from Professor Edward Craig in his Philosophy, A Very Short Introduction, I think he does a really good job at picking out here exactly how Nietzsche is getting at the Christians, saying how they should not be anti-Semitic. So this is from Professor Edward Craig. He says it was only the moral history of the Jews which created the psychological climate in which Christianity could arise. Christians should revere Jews because they have the Jews to thank for the success of Christianity. Right, so this is Edward Craig explaining what Nietzsche is getting at through sections 7 through 9. So as you read through those sections, right, it might seem like Nietzsche's saying some kind of funny things, but really this is what Nietzsche means, right, as we sort through his interpretation and translations. And finally, to round out sections 1 through 10 of the first essay. Just a great quote here from section 10, looking at some values for Nietzsche and where he's going to start shifting this project. He says, to be incapable of taking one's enemies, one's accidents, even one's misdeeds seriously for very long, that is the sign of strong, full natures in whom there is an excess of the power to form, to mold, to recuperate, and to forget. Later on in this work, we're also going to see Nietzsche putting a value on intentional forgetfulness, kind of letting things go, starting over. There's just a seed of it here in section 10. So this wraps up the first part of the first essay. The next video, we're going to get into the remaining sections of the first essay. But for now, I hope this helps.